Hey, everybody, welcome to Pink Shade. It's Thursday, and that means we're going to talk about pop culture and Bravo. And I've got a new guest. It is Melissa, who is known as your Bish therapist. And do we say your last name Reich or Reich? Or am I saying it
Right.
wrong?
Yeah,
Reich.
right. That was
Right.
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's very good to meet you.
So good to meet you, Mary Payne. I feel like we've traveled in the same circles and I just adore you. I love this podcast. So grateful to be here.
Yeah. And we have a mutual friend, Amy Phillips,
Yes.
who gave me
Yes.
info so I could reach out. And I was like, all right. I was like, I got somebody, I gotta break down. I'm following all the trials. I'm solving all the murders. And I am so interested to hear your take as a therapist on Love Hotel and the Valley and what's going on with Real Housewives of Atlanta. I'm
Mhm.
not a below deck person and I have nothing against it. It's just there's so many that somewhere along the way they lost me, you know. Summer
Can
House
I
too,
be
by the way. Yeah.
okay, so Summer House I'm in on, but Below Deck I feel the same way. I've not watched one episode. There's too many iterations. And also, I'm one of those weird people that I get so seasick. Even sometimes watching the movement actually
Really?
makes me
Uh-huh.
yeah. So, I also never gravitated towards it, and so you're not alone.
Okay, I mean, I've watched it, but the last, like, few seasons I haven't watched. A couple of seasons ago, I watched a whole season and covered it, and I really couldn't
Mm.
even tell you why because there was a crossover with a person that was on another show I was covering with Deanna Chang, which was MILF Manor, and
Oh
so
my
Deanna and I
gosh,
were covering
yeah.
that, and one of the young boys, I mean, like a 30-something-year-old, 20-something-year-old was on Below Deck as a charter guest.
Mhm.
So I was like, "Oh, well, we're gonna have to cover that." So then I got
Oh.
sucked into the season.
Sure.
But, Summer House, listen, I know that makes me a liability for anybody who wants to talk Bravo with me, but I've never watched a full episode, and it's
Really?
and it's just too late. I can't catch up. It's too late.
See, can I be honest? I
Yeah,
disagree with that. Now, here's people ask me to cover Sister Wives all the time.
right.
That's too late to catch up on. Like
True.
that boat has there's like 47 seasons.
Yes,
I'm
and
being
they
dramatic,
sit
but
around and do nothing. Yes, right.
right.
Yes, yeah.
But I really do think Summer House you can pick up. I mean, listen, no pressure because I think that we all as content creators, we have the bandwidth for what we have the bandwidth for. And if you
Yeah.
don't, that is totally fine, but it is really good.
I
And
know
I
it
haven't
is.
I
I
haven't
know.
watched since the beginning. I picked up in the middle
Mm.
because I kind of felt the same way in terms of like, I don't know how relevant it is to watch from the beginning, but I started picking up somewhere in the middle and now I'm totally in. So listen, it's never too late.
I know, and it may be if I ever have, like, an extended vacation or I have some sort of surgery where I have to, like, sit in the bed. That
Not
did happen to
surgery.
me a few yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. A few years ago, I had a surgery, and I watched all of Downton Abbey because 'cause I'd never watched one episode, and I
Wow,
really felt
that's
like I'd
amazing.
accomplished something. I mean, I went all the way through the movies, like, I did it all, and I
Wow.
felt I and it got me through. So, if I ever have to have another major surgery, Summer House it is. Summer
Okay,
House it
well,
is. Yeah.
let's also not hope that you have to have a surgery so you can watch it. I hope you stay healthy,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, yeah,
Let's
yeah.
say
Only
that.
if it's like something fun, like a facelift or like a tummy tuck or something.
Oh,
That but
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
absolutely,
yeah, yeah,
sure,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
with you. Yep.
yeah. Well, let's talk about these shows. Okay, so first I want to talk about pop culture because I like to start with pop culture. Are you in on the Karen Reed trial? I mean,
Uh,
literally, that is on my phone right this minute. I just paused it because I'm not caught up. Yeah. Okay.
I am dialed in to the Karen
Okay.
Reed
Good.
trial. I have
Good.
watched every single solitary episode of anything that has to do with her. I am
Okay.
fascinated.
Okay. Well, I've been watching the trial every single day. I was
Mhm.
very happy when I drove here to the beach. I had 6 hours in the car by myself. I could just listen to trial coverage, like literally listen to Emily D. Baker tell me about the trial while the
Yep.
trial was trialing. So, today when I was flying, I did miss a little bit of the testimony because I was flying. I got up, got right back in, rewound, found where I was. Now they just this okay, we're recording this Wednesday. It comes out Thursday, but they just announced no court Thursday, Friday, Monday. See you back on Tuesday because they already were going to take the weekend, but then something happened where they're ahead on their witnesses to testify. So I think that whoever was like the next one probably like couldn't be in town because they were scheduled to go on Tuesday. So they're like no court Thursday,
Oh.
Friday, Monday. So that's going to
Can
be
I
upsetting for me. It's going to be a long break for me. Yeah.
That's so fascinating because I don't know how they're ahead because she was sick and then court had to be canceled.
Only one
So
day,
you
though.
but you would think that would be behind, not ahead. Well, that's interesting. Hmm.
Mhm. So what am I gonna do? So between now and then, what I'm gonna do is catch up on the Diddy trial. Now,
Oh, I've
um,
watched that too.
I'm up to date on Bryan Kohberger, I'm ready for that.
Yes,
Um,
same.
but the Diddy trial, I've been listening to Kate Casey,
Mhm.
because she's covering it. I've been listening to her coverage. She's got a lawyer on there that's talking to her. I think I'll be interested to hear your point of view from a therapist's point of view from the Cassie Ventura, what I've seen. Like I said, I haven't been following it as closely, but
Mhm.
what I saw was she explained everything. But of course, what they're always going to bring up in things like this is her willing participation in quite a bit of it. And it hasn't quite got to where I feel like it's blame the victim, but it's skating the edge of blaming the victim.
Mhm.
And you have to remember he met her when she was very young and, groomed her and kept her
Mhm.
around. And so, yeah, if she's sending him these suggestive texts like she's ready for the freak off or she can't wait, or yes, she'll contact the prostitute, whatever.
Mhm.
I, I see it as grooming, and she's doing what she's told because now she's got this life that she's living. Um, anyway,
Yes.
I think they skated a very fine line on blaming the victim there. What are your thoughts?
I don't think they skated the line, I think they crossed it. But
Okay.
if I'm being honest, I think whenever women historically are put in this position, it is always a group of male lawyers trying to victim blame, victim shame, slut shame, right?
Mhm.
Because having kinks isn't, anything to go on trial for, but what you said a word, which is grooming. I fully agree, and so I actually went on Rachel Leviss, I went on her podcast,
Mhm.
I think it was last year, after the scandal happened, and I talked about grooming because in the court of law, there is a lot that people and abusers can get away with because psychological abuse, there's not a lot of great definitions, and there's certainly not a lot of great accountability holding in terms of our justice system
And
when
ways to
women.
prove it, right? How do you
Correct.
prove it? How do you prove that
Correct.
that person was groomed and not just doing it of their own free will? I mean, yeah.
Right.
All right.
But anyone with any sort of common sense or observational skills whatsoever,
Mhm.
can see that Cassie was very young. She was absolutely groomed by him, and it
Mhm.
sounds like, some of those texts and things, what happens is when you're in abusive relationships, which is wholeheartedly what this was. Did
Right.
you see the video of him attacking her in the hallway and
Of
throwing her
course.
around?
Yeah.
Right. So
Right.
it's
So nobody's gonna look at that and be like, "Oh, she's terrified of him, and here's why."
and
Right.
if that's
Yeah.
what he's willing to do in a public corridor
Uh-huh.
where there's a hallway, can you
Mhm.
imagine what he was willing to do behind closed doors?
Yeah.
It's absolutely frightening, and it's astounding to me, but not surprising, how the lengths that this misogynistic culture will go to try to tear women down, and this is why women don't come forward,
Mm.
because there's the abuse, there's the assaults, and then it happens all over again
Mm.
in a court of law. And
Yeah.
it's just it's a very broken system. Cassie, in my opinion, is an absolute angel who is, meaning angel on earth in terms of her strength, her perseverance, and her willingness to say, "You know what? I know I'm gonna be torn down here, but I'm gonna hold him accountable so that he can't hurt more people."
Mhm.
And I just think her bravery is really something that should be celebrated, and she shouldn't be torn down in
I
any
think
way,
I
shape,
think
or form.
I think a lot of people that are maybe going to be coming forward and testifying are feeling safer to speak their mind because he's behind bars,
Right.
because if he wasn't behind bars and we haven't heard of yet a sort of a number 2 person that's running his enterprise. Now maybe there is someone, but if you were afraid of him and then you're also afraid of whoever's number 2 is, it doesn't seem like a number 2 has been revealed that people would be afraid of that person. It seems like more people are coming
Sure.
forward with their stories because he's behind bars and they feel safer. Yeah.
Well, right, and I think to your point, that is a huge factor in terms of why women don't come forward or why they, um, acquiesce essentially to the abuse. So her text to me is
Mhm.
not evidence of her participating, it's her evidence of her acquiescing because she
Mm.
doesn't wanna get injured or killed or hurt, I mean, I think for all intents and purposes, I don't know Diddy. I haven't assessed him. I can't speak on that, but his behaviors, I can say, are indicative of a very dangerous person,
Mhm.
likely with some very severe psychopathology. And what psychopathology is just kind of, you hear people use the term sociopath, psychopath, and essentially it's all, the psychological correct term is sociopathy. Um, and that happens when people, lack empathy consistently over time. And so not only does he lack empathy, I just feel this visceral reaction every time I see that video or something
Mm.
he says or does. I'm kind of like I joke a little bit. I'm like a bomb sniffing dog when it comes to sociopathy.
Okay. All right.
In my history, I've worked with a lot of different populations. I'm trying to figure out how to say this diplomatically. And so I just am really able to with certain men with those characteristics. It's like a visceral feeling that I get in my body, and I just feel that whenever I watch any sort of coverage with him.
Yeah, and we talk a lot on our shows about sociopath and psychopath. And
Mhm.
explain to me the difference because I know one is sort of like you're born with it, and the other one is sort of like you become. Is that right?
Well, and so they're essentially euphemisms for the same term, which is psychopathology. So a
Okay.
sociopath and a psychopath, people online, if you look at TikTok, they'll say, well, this means this and this means this.
Right.
But
It's
in
probably that's
psychology,
probably where I'm getting my information. Let's be real. Yeah.
and
Yes.
listen,
Yeah.
fair enough. I'm on TikTok too, and I have to check myself too. I'm like, is that right? And I'm like, Melissa, I don't believe that. So they can be very convincing.
Yeah.
But it's essentially just one broad umbrella term, which is psychopathology. And what those terms mean is that brain studies and imaging have shown that people who have psychopathology, their frontal lobes and certain areas of their brain do not light up the way that other folks who have healthy functioning brains do. And
Hmm.
so there is some biological, really the answer to why things happen the way they are is it's called epigenetics. And epigenetics is when environment meets genetics. And so it really, the old in psychology, it was nature or nurture. And we
Right.
now know the answer is always both.
Okay.
I mean, usually both. And so psychopathology means that in terms of how they behave, they don't have pro-social behaviors, meaning they don't have empathy. They're very self-serving. They use other people to serve their needs and desires. But lack of empathy is really the only huge defining characteristic for those specific uh, uh, diagnoses, I would say, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So when you see somebody, we'll say Jax. So Jax, a long time ago on Stassi's podcast, and that was one of the first podcasts I ever listened to because I love Stassi. And okay,
Mhm.
come at me, I don't care. And she had a podcast that was really good, and she still does have a podcast. She has kind of a different one now, but she sat down with. I think it was even on Vanderpump Rules. She sat down with Jax for her podcast and gave him. It was it a sociopath test or a narcissist test?
I
He passed with flying colors.
Oh, well, okay, so I can speak to that too, is that I think it was a narcissist test,
Yeah.
but, Tom Sandoval went on Dr. Drew's or he went on a podcast, and Dr. Drew has this test to look at narcissism, and
Mhm.
I went and I looked at it because part of my training is in psychological assessment as well. Now, I don't provide that, but I took courses on it, and I understand that in these assessments, there need to be some measures to prevent fakery, essentially. And so I took that narcissist test that Dr. Drew gave to Tom Sandoval, and you can answer it the way that you want to get the answer that you want. And
Yeah.
so, unless it's an actual psychological assessment tool. I don't
Uh-huh.
always put a lot of stock in it for that reason because Jax is smart enough to know how to answer those questions to get the desired result that he wants.
But the result that they got was he is a narcissist, he is a sociopath. That was the
Oh,
result.
okay. Well, then it was
She
okay.
what I'm saying is he passed, because she's like, "You have to answer everything." She's like, "And you understand, like, we were together for years, like, you can't lie."
Mm,
He's like, "Okay." And, one of the
I see.
questions was, "If this, then that, would you choose yourself, or would you choose, to help your, an old lady about to get hit by a bus?" And he'd be like, "Well, I mean, she's already in front of the bus, so, I mean, what am I gonna do?"
Yeah.
It was just
Mhm.
all of his answers were the wrong thing to say, and she was like, "Oh my god." And at the end, she was like, "Well, okay, you scored, 19 out of 20, yes, you're a sociopath."
Oh,
Yeah. He was like, "Okay,
okay.
okay. It's funny, look
Yeah.
at me, I'm cute, who cares?" But with
Ugh.
Jax, with his behavior, a lot of his behavior I can relate to with my past with my husband. A lot of his
Okay.
behaviors are just addict behavior, in that he
Mhm.
says, "Yeah, I shouldn't have done it, but look, everybody else would have done the same thing." It's very much of, "Okay, it was wrong, but what would you do if that happened?" Or everybody would do the same. And you're like, "No, they wouldn't."
Mhm.
And he can't ever just say, "Yes, that was wrong. Yes, that was wrong,
Right.
but you would do the same thing." He always is trying to caveat, you would do the same thing. Any guy would do the same thing. And then I noticed this week, I guess it was on the Valley, that Danny was doing the same thing about his drinking that my husband used to do a lot of, like, "Well, everybody was drinking." No,
Mhm.
why are you saying I was drunk? Everybody was drinking. So it's like, if everybody's doing it, then I'm not the problem. So with Danny, his behavior presents to me as addict behavior in the way he speaks about it.
Mhm.
The same as Jax, the way Jax speaks about, like, to, "Okay, I had a cocaine problem, but you did cocaine too." It's like, that's not the point, you know?
That
That's
was
not the point.
so when I watched that scene, it was so textbook addictive behavior where it's
Totally.
like the addict, it's like if they're gonna go down, they're gonna take everyone around them with them
Mhm.
because I think truly, it's funny that you mentioned that Jax failed the test, and so it sounds like he was truthful because I do believe at the core, that Jax his narcissistic traits and tendencies because I can't diagnose, that's not appropriate, and it's also not ethical. I don't know Jax, I'm not his therapist, but I can look at the behaviors and I can tell you that clinically, I look at things on a continuum. And so he is for sure on the higher end of this continuum of these narcissistic traits and tendencies, bordering on, I would say,
Mhm.
antisocial traits and tendencies, meaning, like when he stole the sunglasses
Mhm.
just for kicks,
Just for
he
fun.
yeah, his brain really, eh, he does really seem to have the one thing that all people in addiction have in common, which is just like a thirst for chaos. It's
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
not always even about the substance. It's about the thirst for absolute chaos in relationships, with your friend groups, just creating, the ripple effect of his behaviors on other people. I think he sort of gets a kick out of that. And so for
Right.
me, I'll tell you something funny. I actually didn't watch VPR in the beginning because I felt allergic to Jax. I was so like, I felt
Well,
itchy when I
I
watched
was
him.
so hot for him. I
Oh,
couldn't get enough,
no.
because that just shows you the kind of men
Mary
I've chosen in
Payne.
my life. Oh my god, I was like, "He is
Oh,
so hot, he
honey.
is so mean, he would be so mean to me, and I would be the one to change him."
Oh.
Yeah,
And listen, that's why Britney stuck around and was
that's
there for
right.
so and that's the way people like this have significant others.
Yes,
Women especially think, "I can change him. I'll make
yes.
him want to change."
Mhm.
And
And then it would be like, I'm
somebody
the one he picked. Of all the women,
right.
I'm the one he picked, because I was able to change him, so I'm special.
Yeah.
And you're like, he's been with hundreds and hundreds of women, but I'm the one, you know? Yeah.
Right, right, and so I think, at a point, that's maybe how Britney felt,
Yeah.
um,
Yes.
but I just think that Jax particularly there's something a little bit sadistic about him where it's like, you know that saying misery loves company? Like,
Mhm.
he's not happy unless people around him are miserable and in chaos as well. And so that's something extra special about Jax's personality that I don't necessarily see in someone like Jesse, for example. Jesse and Jax are very similar, right?
I said they're
But
very similar. Jesse's just a little bit smarter.
and more charismatic.
People
I argue.
I've been around Jax twice.
Mhm.
Not, just seen him and had word spoken twice.
Mhm.
And I would argue that he is very charismatic, but I
Okay.
think it's simmering underneath, and you know him enough to know that, whereas Jesse is
Right.
so cutting with his words.
Mhm.
And like when he said to Janet on the Valley, when he said, "This is not a game you want to play," like that scared me a little bit. I was like, "Oh, I'm
Right.
a little scared of him." I could probably take him because I'm probably bigger than him, but I'm like, that scared me a little bit. To
Just
say
give him
that
a
to some
wedgie
Yeah,
with his beige bloomers, you know?
but to say that to somebody, a girl in front of their husband, like, he doesn't care. He said it right to her in front of her husband. He didn't care if he offended her husband, who's his friend. He said, "You're not gonna this is not a game you're gonna be good at. You don't need to try to
Right.
play with me." I was like, "Whoa,
I
whoa."
think that Jax cares less about people seeing behind the mask,
Okay,
and
yes.
Jesse's mask is a little bit more affixed, and he only lets it down in those little moments, and you have to be watching carefully. So
Yeah.
I agree with your assessment on that. Yeah.
That's very interesting. I think that's right. I think Jax is just so like, this has gotten me on TV for 15 years.
Yeah.
This is so
It's
why
made me
not?
famous.
This made me famous,
Yeah.
so people must like it.
Right.
Um, do you have what else are you discussing like on your show and in general? What are you talking? Because we did Karen Reed, we talked about Coburn, Diddy. So when you're talking about things, do you pick like one specific subject or like this is what's happening this week on the Love Hotel? Let's talk about Shannon, you know?
Yeah, great question. So honestly, I have this thing where I will only cover what I am authentically drawn to as a human being.
Hmm.
And I have the privilege of doing that because, I get to do this for fun. This is,
Hmm.
I'm trying to make it a career. I'm trying to, do my best at this. But I have an amazing, wonderful, supportive husband. And so I can really just kind of cherry pick. And so
Hmm.
I look at what does my brain feel authentically drawn to. So what it's been drawn to is Shannon on Love Hotel. Swear to you, I could write a dissertation on her relational issues. I have so much to say about that. So I've covered that. Of course, the Valley is so rich in terms of because I have a huge people that follow me. They're thrivers, survivors of domestic abuse, sober community because I talk a lot about addiction,
Yeah.
as a former drug and alcohol counselor. And so the Valley, I'm trying to make something good out of something really toxic by, making it educational at least a little bit. And then I was covering Atlanta, but you know what? No one seems to care about it. And it really
I
bums me out
know.
because it's so good.
I will say, let's talk about Atlanta really quick. So this last week we had Shamia and Portia sit down as they've been friends for a very long time.
Yeah.
And it was very weird what was happening at that table because
Yes.
Shamia was trying to tell her, as a good friend of me, I'm trying to tell you. And she kept going, "Stop. Why are you doing this? I can't believe you're doing this for the show. I can't." She was trying to call Shamia out and say, "You are overreacting or creating drama for the show," where Shamia's like, "What are you talking about? Like, I'm literally trying to talk to you about something." Something happened when Portia went to the bathroom and came back, and she sort of had reset and was like, "We do need to work this out." And I found that whole thing so interesting because it was like Portia wouldn't really let Shamia talk. And then she
Mhm.
got mad at her and started saying, "You're doing this for the show." I was like, "Where's the evidence of that? Why are you saying that?"
Mhm.
I thought, what did you think? I thought it was interesting.
I also was fascinated by the scene because so much of communication is actually nonverbal. Like
Mm,
the stuff that can really matter, a lot of it is nonverbal. And it was like I felt like I was watching the US Open, like a tennis match, like boom, boom, boom. And it was so fascinating as a therapist to watch, because when I have a history of, when you're in a situation and you're watching it escalate, I saw each and every bit of how they both contributed to that escalation.
mhm.
And so I think that my honest opinion, if I have never loved a new housewife like I love Shamia.
She's great.
I feel, where has this peach been all of
Mhm,
our Real Housewives of Atlanta lives? She should have
mhm,
been on a million years ago. Who dropped the ball on that?
mhm,
Um, and Portia just has this history of, let's face it, relational issues in her romantic and her friendship relationships. And I believe Portia is kind of a perpetual victim in that she feels, I don't think at that dinner she felt she had the bandwidth for Shamia, but
mm,
sometimes life is hard and we may not have the bandwidth. But if this is your sister that you've been
mhm.
friends for decades, right? This is not some random new housewife, like
Right.
who gives a who? This
Yeah,
is your girl. This is your sister. And so it was not surprising to see how Portia behaved, but it was understandable why that made Shamia angry, because Shamia was on the right side of history here, I believe. And I think Portia was just like, listen, I'm going through a real divorce. I can't go through a friend divorce. But the
yeah,
problem is, she doesn't want to address any of the problems that are creating these, what I would call relationship ruptures.
yeah,
So if
yeah,
you
yeah,
have a rupture and you don't deal with it, and then you move on, and then there's another rupture, well, soon the relationship becomes, you can't fix it. It's not
yeah,
fixable.
yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, Portia has a history of doing that in relationships, hoping issues will just fly away and miraculously resolve, and that's just not how life goes.
Yeah, yeah. I'm really I've been watching Atlanta, and maybe it's because it's the only Housewives on right now, like, we're getting Miami soon.
Mhm,
Um, but I've been really enjoying it. I've loved the whole new stylized version of it. I'm
yeah.
generally liking that. I'm really liking, Angela Oakley, because I felt like she was being super honest about her relationship with her husband. She's like, "Oh, yeah, like, we have separated because of what happened." I mean, so I like that when they don't try to say, "Oh, people just try to spread rumors." And she's like, "No, we went through some shit." And I
Mhm,
like that. I feel like she's a grown-up woman who has been through things in her life, and she can, she's like, "And then my daughter got married and didn't tell me. And then my mom doesn't like my husband." I mean, so I think it's like real life, and I really like her. Kelly, I'm getting into, because she literally is like a Betty Boop character. You know
oh
what I
my
mean?
gosh, a literal ray of sunshine.
But
But
didn't
I
you wasn't that
I
interesting about her daughters, that she has the 3 or the 4 daughters, and 3 of them have that brittle bone disease, and
Yes,
the CPS was trying to
yes.
take them away because they thought she was
Oh
beating her
my
children?
gosh.
You're like,
I
"Whoa, we skated past that. That's a huge story."
Right, and not only
Terrible.
that, but she has an ex-husband who, by for all intents and purposes, has been allegedly very abusive, and
Yeah,
talking about scary, right? Like threats.
yeah,
And I kind of believe that Kelly, I think she's a beautiful soul, but I think her bubbly personality is built off of trying to keep herself safe, to keep
mm,
people around her so that she's not alone. So that, and I also think some of it, like trauma survivors, a lot of times we do this thing where, um, will just not want to deal with the emotion. So we'll kind of like have a little bit of toxic positivity accidentally, right? Unintentionally. And sometimes I get that a little bit with Kelly. Like, I
mhm,
want to see your sadness. Like, you're not a ray of sunshine every day. And if you are, well, you're not feeling something. So, I feel like I wanna peel back the layers of Kelly and get to know
mm.
her, but, I think she needs to feel safe enough to do that.
So you just said toxic positivity, which reminded me of the recap I just did with Kimberly that, came out on Wednesday about the Valley. She used the phrase toxic positivity to describe Nia. And what you're
Mm,
saying is the covering up trauma. Obviously, we didn't know this about Nia, but she said it on this latest episode of The Valley, of all that she went through, and
right.
she said, "I'm intentional in my positivity because of what I went through. Today, I'm grateful that I have a home, but then I was grateful that I had a car to live in." So she's been through so much that she says, "I'm intentional with my positivity, and maybe I could be a light and help other people." But like
Mhm,
you're saying, sometimes when you're like that, all your friends around you will get mad and be like, "But you're not being real. You're not being real, and we don't like it." And especially if we're on a show where we're all getting paid the same amount to show our
mhm,
lives, and you're not, and you see that a lot in Housewives and some of these shows, where what really they're mad at the person about is mad about is because they came late to a party, when it's like, "This is a cast call. We have to be there. You didn't have to come because you did something else and we all had to go." So
Mhm.
sometimes they're mad about that kind of stuff, or like you got invited to be a speaker at something and you didn't add me, so I didn't get that money to be a speaker at something. So there's all these little things. So I think it's very interesting what you said with Nia and her toxic positivity. That's a little bit of what they're mad about. They're like, well, that's great that you're so happy and you and your husband are true partners and handle
Mhm.
everything together with therapy and all that. But we are shooting a reality show where we have to show all our shit, you know?
Mhm. And it's so funny because where I talked about toxic positivity, that initially came from that scene with Nia, and as a therapist, I swear to you, it was like a light bulb went off in my head, and so I just wanna explain quickly, my assessment was like, so she growing up had her and her mom were chronically unhoused, for people listening that maybe don't know, and when you're growing up as a child and you have what's called scarcity trauma,
Mhm,
so as humans, the only thing we really absolutely have to have our needs met is like shelter, food, and safety.
mhm,
And when those needs aren't met as children, there's a scarcity trauma that happens and really can rewire children's brains. And the thing that became apparent to me is that I think Nia in this scenario, it's they're arguing about semantics. She's being as open as she knows how to because I believe when she was a child, you have to develop this sense of secrecy when you know if someone at school finds out, you're going to get separated from your mom and
mhm.
children and youth are going to get involved. So
Yeah,
I believe that Nia has this suit of armor to self protect. And I believe that she's doing the same thing because the only thing that matters to her is Danny and those children. And
right.
so I believe I'm viewing it more as much more self protective due to that child scarcity trauma, and this is as open as she knows how to be because I think she worries in real time if people think that Danny has an addiction, what is going to happen to her current family unit? Are children and youth going to get involved there? Is she at risk of losing her home, her car, her job?
Yeah.
And for someone in that position, that fear would override any requirements of being on a reality TV show. She's doing the best she can, I believe.
I thought it was interesting when she was arguing with, Brittany and Jasmine in Brittany's room, and Danny came kinda stumbled in like, "Are y'all mad at me? Like, what's going on?" And then they went back in the bedroom, and she was saying just, like, so many things I've heard myself say. It was like, "Yeah, everybody was drinking," and she was sort
Mhm.
of saying the words that he was saying too. And then, like, when she came home from the dinner and she sat down, she goes, "Well, you told me you drank tequila, but I didn't know it was in the closet." And he said, "That's where the bottles were." She goes, "Okay, that makes sense." It seems like that is a show for people to see that she knows and she understands. But in my mind, I'm like, they're trying to protect this image because they're very involved with their church, number
Yep.
one. And she absolutely doesn't want the word to get out that he has some sort of substance issue. That'll affect his career as a voiceover artist, which then affects her and the kids.
That's right,
Yeah,
and creates that again, that trigger for scarcity trauma, where if he loses his job, what happens to this house? What happens to our kids? I've lived in my car. I can't do that.
yeah.
She's just trying to do the best she can for her children, but it's so interesting you bring up that scene because what I wrote down is I can tell that she's making excuses to placate Danny's anger in the moment. It was
Mm,
super obvious to me, and she's done this millions of times before.
mhm,
Cameras were on, and so she felt safe enough to say something, but Danny has this real, I call it a simmering rage,
mhm.
which she can see. Like, there was one scene where Danny smirked, and she got so triggered and defensive, and she said, "Don't do that smirk. I know what that's about."
Mhm.
And I forget what point it was in
Well,
the
she said
show.
"Don't do that nervous laughter."
Yes.
And he goes,
And
"What?" He goes, "What?" And she goes, "Quit doing the nervous." I think she's trying to say, "Quit nervous laughing about me talking about you chugging tequila in a closet." She goes, "It does look bad. It does." And he's like, "Oh,
right.
okay. All right." Yeah.
But I'm saying that I can see that that's the mark of a woman who's had those conversations so many times, that knows the slight change in his smile and tone of voice. And so when you're dealing with a partner who may be overutilizing substances, because I can't judge what's going on with Danny, I can only look at what I see.
Yeah.
it's what happens when they're confronted about the ripple effects of their behavior. And I think that, Danny's saying, well, he's had to go to therapy before because of his behaviors when he's blacked out on alcohol, but he's shocked and surprised that it's still causing an issue. And, so it's a lot of rich information, and it just tells me that there's so much more under the surface that they're
Mhm.
just desperately trying to hide. And it's not disingenuous. I think Nia's trying to preserve her safety in her family unit.
It's really, really interesting. It's really
Mm.
interesting to think of it that way because I see it as her trying to save face because we don't want him to
Right.
lose his job because he's the main breadwinner. I find it fascinating. All right, so we also touched on Shannon on Love Hotel. Now, when Shannon did sort of explain that she was coming up on the 1 year of her DUI, well, anybody that's been in any kind of traumatic situation knows that somehow biologically your brain or your body or something knows it's
Mhm.
an anniversary. My
Mhm.
husband had a sister that passed away as a child, and when they were children, and
Mhm.
in December he would always get he goes, I
Mm.
can't explain it, I could feel it because when it happened it was in December, right, even though it's
Yeah.
50 years ago at this point. But
Sure.
it's interesting that watching that I was like, okay, this might be because she says, tomorrow is the 1 year anniversary. And then she shows all these men who she's technically supposed to be wanting to be attractive to. Let me show you what a hot fucking mess I am. Let me show you
I
a
was
picture of
like,
my bloody face. So I was like,
I was
girl,
like, Shannon, no, not the
no,
picture.
no. But it's interesting because people are like, what is up with her? I go, I just see her life literally did not turn out like she planned it. And she planned to be married to David Bedore and live in the $20 million mansion with the crystals embedded in the wall and the indoor basketball court. That's what she planned. So
Mhm.
that didn't happen. And then she planned John Jansen, this amazing boyfriend, whatever. And that didn't happen. So, you know what I mean? I
Mhm.
think she's just struggling to get above water.
I absolutely agree, and I said on my podcast pretty much the one a similar piece to that, which is that I think that Shannon is grief-stricken
Mm,
because she is at an age in her life where, like you said, the picture of what she had for herself in her mind, it is totally different. She is, recovering from a DUI because, I mean, I in the sober community, post-acute withdrawals, and I don't know if she stopped drinking, but post-acute withdrawal syndrome lasts for over a year after
she
people get
definitely is
into.
she's drinking on this show. She did not stop drinking?
Right. So
Yeah.
my point is is that when, she's not Shannon does not love to feel a feeling. She does not love
Mm,
to allow herself to feel an emotion, and so I think she's profoundly unhappy, and what she does is she projects that onto all the males who she dates, because the one thing that became super clear to me with this whole Shannon stuff, I've talked about it every week, is that she is recreating all of her relational issues with men that she doesn't know. So what does that tell me? That tells me that Shannon is a huge part of the issue, and that she's recreating this chaos. Here we see again chaos, right? With people
yeah.
overutilizing alcohol. She uses this chaos, I feel, to be able to express these painful emotions. Like when she and Earl fought, I don't know how much it was about Earl and how much of it was about, I'm on the show, I feel like a fish out of water, nobody but Earl likes me. These
Mhm,
three women are swimming in D, and
mhm,
I'm just like, no one likes me. And I think also that's why she was with David and with John Jansen, because it's like if anyone likes her, even if she's not happy or doesn't like them, she settles. And we've seen her do it
mm,
time and time and time again on Love Hotel.
mhm,
And so it just really did give me a lot of insight into, I just think she has a lot of big emotions, does not know how to process those, uses these conflicts to express them. But when you're not being like, when you have a feeling about situation A and you're making it about situation B. All those feelings about situation A really get stuck and then you stuff them and then it gets all muddy because feelings are on top of feelings, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The thing with Earl was so interesting because she did what she thinks is cute or guys like her. She's like, "What? Huh?" And she that's always kinda been a cutesy thing that she does. And when he was like he doesn't know her from TV. So
Mhm.
he doesn't know that sort of her shtick. So he goes, "Why do you always look at me like you wanna slap me?" Because when she's doing that, he feels judged by her.
Right.
And it's interesting, I haven't even thought about it that way of her feeling like, "Oh, all these, like, sexy ladies here and people want them, but they don't want me." I would feel that way if I was in a
Oh,
show
me
with those women. I would be like, "Okay, these are all, like, beautiful, sexy women." And
yeah,
Shannon is a beautiful woman in
sure.
her own way, but she's very sort of, little more conservative. And by
Right.
the way, there's plenty of guys out there that like that too.
Mhm.
The same amount of guys that like Luann being the opposite, you know? So
Right.
but she just doesn't see it. She doesn't see that she's got this to offer, you know? And
Right.
and it's like, "Why?" You know, "Why don't you see it?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sad, and I agree, Shannon, I don't believe she has any self-worth. I don't believe she
Mm,
has any self-esteem. I actually believe that Shannon is one of those women who will, she'll be sad about feeling bad, and then, Giselle was like, "Listen, you're too fabulous for this," and then she'll almost parrot it, like, "Oh, yeah, I'm too fabulous," but she doesn't really believe that.
yeah.
And so it's
Yeah.
like, well, you can't talk yourself into feeling fabulous. If that worked, I'd be out of a job. So, I I think that Shannon really, if I'm being honest, people who overutilize alcohol to the point where it's created some consequences, right? Like a
Mhm.
DUI or something like that. Alcohol is a depressant, and it
Right.
literally makes people feel depressed. It makes them emotionally volatile. It can make them, it what you experienced with your husband, I'm sure that you kind of know what I mean here, but there's just like a funk. People who use a lot of alcohol are in a lot because it's
Mhm.
just so toxic and unhealthy for us.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that she doesn't give herself the chance to have clarity. Like if she had the DUI and then used the opportunity to really put the alcohol down and just assess temporarily, I
Mhm.
think that she would be in a much better position, number 1. And number 2, I'm gonna go out on the limb and say, I actually think Love Hotel was a bad idea for Shannon personally. Maybe
Mhm.
professionally was a great
Mhm.
idea, but I think after John Jansen, she's just too triggered. She's triggered by all of it, by, not feeling wanted, not feeling like she can catch up with I mean, but like you said, I would feel the same way. I'm like a grandma compared to
Yeah.
Luann, and
Yeah,
she's
yeah, yeah.
so much older than me. I'm like, "That is so rude," so I can
Yeah.
understand how Shannon feels.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was a bad choice for her, especially if they're filming right at a pivotal time where it's 1 year since her DUI, which is gonna bring
Right.
up all this shit for her. And it's I did hear, Ashley on Watch What Happens Live the other night made a really good analogy about the 4 of them being the Sex and the City, and Luann
Yeah.
is obviously Samantha,
Right.
and Shannon is obviously Charlotte,
Right.
and Giselle is obviously Miranda,
Mhm.
and then Ashley is like, "And I'm Carrie," you know? But I was like, "That is so good. That is so good." But I think
It
that
was.
Shannon probably is like, they're gonna just throw her a bone and film something with her and all that, and I'm like, it wasn't the right time for her. Now, I don't know. I haven't,
No.
watched ahead. I don't get screeners, so I just, like, watch it when it comes on Monday like everybody
Same.
else, or maybe
I'm not
Sunday, I
that
think was my
important.
yeah, yeah.
No one
No, no, no.
sends me a screener. No
Oh,
one comes to me.
no, I ask, and I get told
Oh.
no. I always ask. They did send me Salt Lake City screeners, so I'm hoping they'll
Oh,
so I don't how I got in with the Salt Lake City person that liked me, but each show is different, and you have to ask for
right.
each show, and
Mhm.
each person can tell you no. Like, John Hill told me, and John Hill works on Radio Andy, that for
Right.
every show that comes out, he has to ask every single time, every single season, for every single show.
John
Yes.
Hill?
Yeah, he said he has to, like, call the below deck person and say, "I need to get below deck screeners, and I need to get below deck,
Oh.
Australia screeners, and I need to get Miami's coming out, don't forget to send me screeners." Just every time, every
Oh.
season, he asks us every time.
Well,
That's just
that
how
makes me
Bravo does
feel
it.
less bad
Yeah.
because to me, you and John Hill are legends. So I'm like, well, if y'all can't get screeners, then
No, 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 no.
I
He
feel
gets
better.
he gets all the screeners, but
Of course.
I don't, but they did give them to me for Salt Lake. Now probably but I wrote to ask if I could get screeners for the Valley so that I could have my episodes out super early, and they just wrote
Hmm.
back and said, "No, we're just keeping a tight list on who can get screeners for the Valley." I was like, "Okay, great." They say no,
Oh,
and you just the next
man.
show comes out and you try for that one. I'm just like, "Okay."
That's right. Doing your
Mm,
best, aren't we
I'm just
all?
doing my best. All right, let me see what I wanna ask you else about Love Hotel. What about okay, what do you think about Earl? Do you think Earl's gonna get voted off? What do you think is in that letter that she gave him this week? Because she looked very proud of herself for handing him this letter, and he
Hmm.
looked like he, like, broke into tears. So, what do
Hmm.
we think is in that letter?
Okay, this is my theory. And again, since we don't get screeners, we have no idea if I'm correct. But
Right, no
I
idea.
believe that Shannon, the other guy. So remember how Shannon picked, and I'm not remembering any of these men's names.
Okay,
I don't know what
I've
is
got a
with.
list, so tell me.
Okay. So the one that Shannon initially gave her key to, but then now he's with Countess Luann. He always says, I love my life. Who's that guy?
Okay, that guy is James, and Kate
Okay.
Casey has inside scoop
Uh-huh.
that he is a total loser with no job.
I
Okay.
mean, doesn't he give those vibes? It like
He's
he gives the
cheesy,
vibe of like
cheesy.
a guy who loves Margaritaville and loves just like being
Yes.
on the beach, drinking and being like, "I love my life." You know what I mean?
Yes,
That's the
yes.
vibes he
He's
gives
from
me.
Santa Monica, he's an entrepreneur,
Oh,
and
entrepreneur,
he's
sure.
the I love my life, but he went to USC, so that's what he bonded with Shannon over.
Right,
Um,
but now Shannon is gravitating towards the
Adam,
Adam.
and
Yes.
he's the worldly guy that, like, went to Oxford and went to Yale and lived in Italy,
Right.
and he's, like, overeducated, that guy.
Right.
Yeah.
So Adam, Countess Luann, and Shannon were walking. And so Shannon was she literally was like, I'm done with Earl. Let me move on to Adam. And then Adam said, this was the moment I knew he was done with her. He told Shannon, if you and Countess Luann were one woman, you would be my perfect woman. And I was like, bye, Adam. Bye bye. See you later, you dumbass.
That
What
was
are you even
awful.
talking about, you douche? It was so rude, and so but here's the thing, Shannon is like she's not like Countess Luann. Countess Luann, she's like, "Who cares? I'm just trying to
Yeah.
get,
Mhm.
I'm just trying to get my needs met," which, like,
Yeah.
fine, good for her. But for Shannon, she was like, I she thought she was going from Earl to Adam, and now she's done with Adam, and I believe the note says, "Will you be my something or other?" Like, I think she's choosing him, and she's gonna eliminate Adam.
Oh.
That's what I think. And he's so overwhelmed with, like, shock and gratitude because he thought he was done.
Okay, that's a
That's what I
great
think.
theory. That's a flip it and reverse it. I didn't think about
Mhm.
that, but you could be right. The tears could be because he's so grateful that he's getting the second chance and but listen, they're never going to work out. He where does he live? Earl lives in he
Oh.
lives in Atlanta. He like lives on a lake. He's got the stupid weird shoes. Um and I think she purposely picks in my opinion, everybody's feelings are different. My opinion, the least attractive man,
Mhm.
she picked him because she was like, the least attractive guy will like me. That's like me when
Yep.
I was growing up and there was a boy band, or a
Oh.
rock band. I would pick what I deemed to be the least attractive member of Guns N' Roses or whatever, and I'd be like, "That's my boyfriend." You know what I mean? Because I was
Oh.
like, I could never get the lead singer. So I think Shannon does that. She's like, "Okay, of all
Yeah.
these guys, Earl, he's a legal consultant. He's probably pretty successful, but he's not very cute, so I'm gonna go for him because I know I could get him." That's what
I
I took from that.
fully agree. First of all, Mary Payne, you deserve lead singer energy, okay? Number 1, snap. Okay,
No,
number
no, no.
2.
I'm definitely like the bass player or the keyboarder
Okay,
for sure.
fine, but I'm saying you deserve no scraps, my dear. Um, but I fully agree because remember Giselle, they were talking about how Earl's her safety net, and
Yeah,
so I knew as soon as Adam said that thing that was so rude
so
that
rude.
she was like, all she had was Earl. She has no other connections or roads to any other guy.
And she doesn't
I
even
don't
know that the ladies had a meeting and decided to give Adam to her.
Mm,
And I think when she sees
what?
that, because I doubt we're gonna get a reunion, when she sees that, her feelings are gonna be like, that would hurt my feelings so bad, like, "Oh, they think I'm such a loser that they're giving me some guy, I can't get him on my own."
But I think that's how she's already feeling. I think she'll
Yeah.
be very upset when she sees it, but it's like a literal representation of how she feels inside.
Mhm.
And that's truly what happened. Shannon is just getting seconds of what these other women don't want, and that
Yeah.
has gotta be a blow to her already just, like, really terrible self-esteem, and it bums me
Yeah.
out because I want fabulous women to believe that they're fabulous. Because I think that if she did, she'd probably utilize alcohol less than she does, I think.
Mhm.
I mean, people
Yeah.
don't drink a lot because 'cause they're super happy.
That's
They
right.
just don't.
They really don't. They might have a drink when they're super happy, but they don't.
Sure.
Let me ask you this too. Luann talked about this she's on a 7-year cycle because she was like, "I'm on this
Yes.
7-year cycle and then the birthday and the 717." We've never really seen Luann ever have an emotion like that where she actually got sort of choked up about, like, a family situation. Like, we've never seen it. I've never seen it.
No.
She
Same.
had to, like, put herself in the bathroom and, like, pull herself together talking about 'cause they said, "Oh, something," and she goes, "Well, I was married for 7 years, then divorced, and then I was with this guy for 7 months, and now I'm on the 7th year of that," and that whole thing really means I've never heard of such. Is this
Mhm.
7-year cycle something that you've heard of before?
So I haven't heard of that specific thing, but it does make sense that, I don't know if this is true or not. Physiologically, our bodies, like, every, like, certain amount of years, like, cells regenerate and things,
Mm,
our bodies
mhm,
change. And so if that stands to be true, why not the same thing for our mental health? So it's not like
mhm.
there's something I've studied about this or like a major theory that I'm aware of. But I definitely think that the whole cycle thing speaks to how if we don't look at underlying issues that are leading us,
Yeah.
there's going to be repetitive behaviors that kind of boomerang around back to us. I like to
Mhm.
say sometimes it's the universe's way of saying, well, you don't get away without, this hitting you head in the head again for, the seventh time or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
I want 'cause Countess Luann doesn't give me the sense again of someone who's incredibly, comfortable with her emotions, and again, I think she drank, overutilized alcohol because
Mhm.
she struggles to feel those big emotions too, as evidenced by, having to go into the bathroom, finding out that that guy had the
Yeah.
same birthday as her dad, right? It brought up so much grief. So it just tells me that she does have a lot of feelings there that she's in process of, or maybe not, but that are maybe leading her to have some repetitive cycles of some behaviors.
It's so interesting. All these people are so interesting. I'm so, happy I got to talk to you about all of them because I'm always like armchair expert,
Mhm.
psychoanalyzing everybody. And so okay, I would like to wrap it up with this. Jax and Jesse really are the same, and that's why they're drawn to each other, and that's why Jesse's always taking it for Jax and all that stuff. But, my theory is Jesse's a little smarter. You said his mask is on just a little tighter.
Mhm.
Do you think in the terms of sociopath, psychopath, whatever, I definitely think Jax is there.
Mm.
Jesse, I feel like has a little more, and it could just be what we're seeing on TV, but he seems to have a little more paternal feelings or, really being into like his kid and stuff of what we're seeing on
Right.
TV. Now, Michelle will tell you, like, yeah, okay, great, not so much. He does leave the kid with the nanny all the time. Um, what are your thoughts on these 2 particular guys as far as if they were your clients and you could just broadly diagnose them and give
If
them
they
some
were
tips on how to navigate life?
If they were my client, they would never come back, because I've worked with men like this my entire career, and I've had death threats as a
Oh,
result because so again, it's a long story, but I am unable to be manipulated by men like this. I have their
okay.
number. I understand what's going on. I'm not able to be fooled. And so with someone like this, when you're not able to be fooled, what do? They try to like deflect, project, well, you used cocaine too, or blah, blah,
Uh-huh,
blah, whatever.
mhm.
So, if they were my client, which they wouldn't be because I don't think they really want to change. That's the only like, when it comes to human beings and the question of can they change, the only real question is like, do they want to? Anyone can change under
Mhm.
any circumstances if they have the motivation. And I don't believe that Jax is motivated to change at all. I think that Jax has been rewarded for his bad behavior by becoming famous because of it.
Mhm.
I believe that Jesse, here's what I'll say about Jesse. I think he feigns more care and kindness and awareness, but I don't believe he actually possesses those things because, for example, when he went on Watch What Happens Live, he continued to kind of blame shift about his behaviors to Michelle. And
Mhm.
so it's like, well, I think Jax and Jesse are both two people that present differently but have very similar pathology. I can't necessarily give a diagnosis because, again, that wouldn't be ethical, but
Right.
I can definitely say that there is antisocial behaviors. There is
Mhm.
for sure a lack of empathy. And especially, here's what I would argue with Jesse, right? Jesse seems like more of a present parent, seems being the key word. Because
Mhm.
if he, in my opinion, really cared about his daughter, he would probably treat the mother of his daughter, right,
Mhm.
differently.
Yeah.
Because what happens is kids don't learn how to teach others from what they're told, they learn by modeling and
Mhm.
watching.
Mhm.
And so I think I'm going to stick with my previous assessment, which is I think that Jesse's mask is just a fixed tighter and it
Mhm.
slides less often. Jax doesn't care if the mask comes off because Bravo pays him to take it off.
Until Brittany finally told production what was going on and threatened
Mhm.
his job, and that's what he's mad about. He's not mad that she said he did cocaine or anything. She's mad that
Right.
his job is threatened.
So what does
Yeah.
that tell you about Jax?
He's
That
only
he
looking out for
literally
himself.
only
Yeah.
that he only cares about himself, and let's not forget, do you remember one time Jax was asked the question of, like, if you were dying of had, like, a terminal illness, what would you do? And he said he would off a bunch of people because he wanted to know what it felt like.
That sounds about right. That would be your I mean,
Right.
who would have that thought?
But
Who would have that thought?
and that's my point. It's like and I don't think he says these things for shock value. I think he just he's doesn't need his mask because people like on Watch What Happens Live, they did a poll about like all the Valley men and who would
Mhm.
want to date who. There were 14% of people that chose Jax and Jesse. And I said 14% of these people need to get to therapy ASAP Reno
Mhm.
because that is the wildest choice after watching these men. But to your
Well,
point, sometimes when we're young, insecure, we think, oh, maybe I could get a Jax. Maybe I could get a Jesse. I'd let him
yeah.
abuse me because, it
Mhm.
would make me feel something.
And then I'll be
Um,
famous too. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Well, I think the difference between Jesse and Jax is you'll see Jesse this past episode said, Michelle's got these deep-seated hatred towards me, and I have no idea why. And you're like, bro,
I literally wrote that, Mary Payne. I wrote it and then I wrote bro. I was like,
I
you don't
did
know why
too. That's
she's mad?
exactly what I wrote. That's exactly what I wrote.
Twinsies. Did you? That's
I
so
wrote next to it,
funny.
bruh.
Me too. I love
What
that.
are you talking about? But then on the other hand, Jax will say, I mean, Brittany's really mad at me. And of course, she has every reason to be. I've been a terrible husband, but I mean, at the same time, she's not a great wife. So he'll say the right thing, and then he can't just stop. He has to then say, but that she did it too. Do you know what I mean? He
Right.
can't just say she has every reason to be mad at me. I get it, and then stop. He has to go, but at the same time, she's been terrible. You know what I mean? Whereas
Right.
Jesse
And
just seems to be like on another planet, clueless.
oh,
So no blame on himself for what he's done.
no, and that's why Jesse, like I said, he feigns accountability. Like when he woke up after like his drunken like bloomer freak out, like he was like, I understand now that I was wrong, but it really was Michelle's fault. And it's like, then you don't understand that you were wrong.
Right, right.
So I definitely think that when I'm all for people going into treatment, sobriety, recovery, whatever that looks like for them, but based on behaviors, I can tell you that Jax is no different than he was before, right
That's
at
what she
this
said. That's
point.
what Brittany says. She says, "I guess he's sober, but he's literally the exact same person." I go, "Yeah." He is.
And sometimes people get quote unquote, they get sober, but really what happens is they're dry. Sobriety is a process of significant self exploration and work on yourself. It's tedious, it's hard, it's the hardest work people have ever done. Your husband could attest to that.
Yep.
And it's not hard to take the substance away and to have all the same behaviors that you had as an addict. That's being dry, that's not being
Mhm.
sober.
Yeah.
And so again, I can't say I don't know, but Jax's behaviors tell me that he's not working a program where he is looking to be accountable for things. Because a true accountability lies in I did this, full stop. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter what someone else does. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
Mhm.
And that is the end of it. It doesn't matter if someone accepts the apology. It doesn't matter what the person did. It's solely on me. And when Jesse and Jax can take that route, then to me, that will be a sign that something shifted. Until that point, they are just a revolving door of bullshit.
Yep. Well, amen. Oh my god, that's a good place to end it because wow, yeah, they're a revolving door of bullshit. Okay, it's just like Jesse Jack, Jesse Jacks, Jesse
Yeah.
Jacks. They're just going through that revolving door of bullshit.
Mhm.
Tell everybody where they can find you on social media and where they can find your podcast too.
Sure. So it is your Bish Therapist podcast. Bish is
Mhm.
spelled Bish because
Mhm.
I can be bitchy, but that's not a great handle. So it's your Bish Therapist. You
But
can
it does
find me.
it does come from Joe Gorga saying my bitch wife.
That's exactly right.
Right.
And
Okay.
it was good. Amy, so yes, Amy gave me the moniker coming from Joe Gorga saying that about Teresa. That's for
Uh-huh.
sure a play off of that.
Mhm. Yes.
Um, so you can find me on Instagram. That's my biggest social media platform. And my podcast is available anywhere you listen to podcasts. I am on YouTube. I am on Patreon, Your Bish Therapist on Patreon. I am on Blue Sky, TikTok, Facebook. I mean, all of the things.
Everywhere,
So
and it's always your bitch
everywhere.
therapist.
Always your Bish Therapist. My Patreon is subscribers and free members as well, but then the podcast is also completely free. And what I'm doing is I'm offering on Apple Podcast, on YouTube, and on Patreon, I'm offering subscription services for
Mhm.
people, because people really hate ads and things like that.
Oh, I
So if
know.
you love my podcast and you hate an ad, please sign up. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, yeah, subscribe if you wanna get that ad-free stuff. I have that too
Yeah,
on, my $10 level too. I was like, "It's all ad-free. It's ad-free. You get the video,
right.
everything ad-free, ad-free, ad-free."
Yes.
Yeah, because people really will complain about an ad. I'm like, "Well, then
Oh,
well"
sure will, Mary Payne.
but I'm like, then guess what? Here's an option for you
Right, exactly. Because we still gotta make that coin, honey.
because podcasting ain't free. It ain't
No,
free.
and it ain't easy.
It ain't free and it ain't easy. And everybody, if you're listening here and you don't follow me, please follow me at Pink Shade Pod. That's where you can find. There'll be a fun reel about this. I wrote a couple of notes here. Revolving door of bullshit will probably win. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. All right.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Melissa.
much.
Don't hang up. Thank you.
Thank you.